Welcome to the WARC Podcast. I'm Anna Hamill. Today we're officially kicking off our coverage of Cannes Lions and digging into some of the trends we expect to define the festival in the south of France next week. And we're kicking things off with good news. The WARC Podcast will be your eyes and ears at the festival, whether you're on the Croisette or on the other side of the world. We're going to be releasing daily podcasts during Cannes with all of the insights you need to know from the day's highlights. WARC has also curated the Creative Impact track at Lions this year, so on the pod, we'll be interviewing some of the best and brightest marketing minds, including effectiveness gurus, leading CMOs, and many, many more. So tap follow to get new episodes as they drop every day from Monday through Friday at the festival, and be sure to sign up to WARC News, our free daily newsletter, to get the highlights in bite-sized form delivered straight to your inbox every morning. Joining me today to discuss some of the biggest trends we expect to see at this year's Cannes Lions Festival is David Tiltman, Chief Content Officer here at WARC. Hi, David.
Hi, Anna. Good to be here.
So Cannes Lions sets the agenda for the advertising industry. It really defines a lot of the hot topics that we're going to see over the next 12 months. But there's been a lot of change in the marketing and advertising industries right now. And against that backdrop of global uncertainty, it really feels like a creative reckoning is afoot this year. In your view, what's a big story you're watching out for from the festival? Something tells me Elon Musk won't be turning up again this year.
I don't think there's one big story. We know that if you look across the festival, there's going to be a lot of talk about AI and what's happening there. There's going to be an awful lot of talk about the future of like the holding company model and that whole sort of agency business models being realigned. You know, that's sort of the mood music for the whole festival. I think if we think specifically about creative impact, which is the content stream which we at WARC co-curate with our colleagues at Lions, you know, we're not talking specifically about AI in any sessions, but all these things, that sort of uncertainty, that sort of volatility in the industry, sit behind a lot of the sessions that we're running. And I wrote a sort of preview opinion piece on this just this week, and I feel like there's an urgency in the industry now to really, I don't get some answers, but to get some direction, to get some ways forward, because there's so many questions being asked of us that it's almost like the theory isn't enough. We've got a lot of theory now, and everything we need to do now is about turning the theory of how to be effective into practice, and to understand, you know, the sort of new media and communications landscape that's emerging, and give people some actual things they can take away and do, because we know that there's a real desire by our audience to be proactive, to respond, and they really need some of the tools to help them do that.
Yeah, that sounds really relevant, especially as this week we also saw Mark Reed is leaving WPP as CEO. There's a lot of upheaval in the industry. Big announcement the week before Cannes.
Yeah, well, I'm sure there'll be plenty of talk about that, particularly on the WPP beach.
But it goes back to what you're saying around agency models, around how the industry is reacting to all of this. And again, going back to really proving the case for effectiveness when times are challenging. You know, that's the backdrop of this year's festival for sure. So let's talk a little bit about reframing brand building for the C-suite.
Yeah, so I selected this as one of the sort of topics that we're going in hard on in the creative impact stream. And really, it's just a continuation of what I've just been saying. It's like, you know, we know so much now about the importance of brand building, both within a sort of advertising context as brand building advertising, but more broadly as the benefits having a strong brand has to in a number of different areas. And we called this the multiplier effect in a report we released earlier this year. Strong brands act as a multiplier in all sorts of different other areas. And we're just starting to unpick that. But we do feel that there's there's a sense that we can end up talking to ourselves as an industry, whereas what we need to be doing is making that case more compelling for the C-suite. You know, I'm acutely aware that sometimes if we're talking to people outside of the of marketing, we start using phrases like brand building, and they think we're talking about, I don't know, something from the 20th century. You know, it's like we're sort of talking about fax machines or something like that. It just, there is a sense within parts of the business community that this sort of stuff all got left behind in the digital revolution, whereas we think, and we know that that's not the case. So we need to find ways to talk in a different way about topics like creativity and brand building that really cut through. We've got a whole bunch of sessions that are going to start to look at this. I'm presenting with James Herman, who many of our listeners will know. He teaches the Masters of Advertising Effectiveness course for WARC, and Laura Jones, who is the Chief Marketing Officer at Instacart. Instacart's actually an incredible story. I don't think it's well known enough in the effectiveness world yet, but they've really gone from spending nothing on brand building to going into the Super Bowl this year, and that's been under Laura's watch. So what we're going to be doing with those is really looking at some of the blockers, particularly organizational and cultural blockers, to putting the theory into practice, and then starting to ask, well, how do you solve for this in real life? How do you get around some of these obstacles? But we've got lots of other stuff going on through the week. There's going to be a great B2B session with Dr. Marcus Collins and LinkedIn that looks at a concept they're developing called buyability, which again is deliberately with the C-suite audience in mind. And then we're going to have a really interesting session with Karen Crum from EY and I think with Interbrand, where they're going to be looking at different ways of framing creativity and brand building. And in particular, Karen's going to be talking about risk. I think we've all got a little bit frustrated with this idea that marketers need to, quote unquote, be brave. It's not about bravery, it's about understanding risk. And Karen's going to be talking about the role that risk plays in business and how we turn risk from being a sort of reason not to do something to actually a superpower.
I think that's a really good point as well, because we saw in some new research by Lines recently on the state of creativity that creative confidence is a real issue for brands, and, you know, producing those high quality insights, seizing cultural moments. Those are big challenges to creative confidence. And so I think that what you're saying about risk and how to work within, you know, what is realistically quite a precarious economic environment for a lot of brands, a lot of categories right now, as to how to really build up and feel confident in making those big game-changing creative decisions.
Yeah, and it's really interesting. And I don't want to give away too much before the sessions, but you know, risk is something that CFOs understand and mitigate for. And similarly, Laura Instacart talks about trying to get CFOs to think about ROAS, or return on investment, as a portfolio game, much as you would like thinking about portfolio investing, and you have a portfolio. You don't put all your eggs into one type of asset. And again, it's just about how do we turn some of this into language that a CFO is going to understand and engage with, rather than, as I said, use language that sounds more like it's from the era of fax machines.
Yeah, and it's about getting marketing back on the front foot again. And what we hear over and over at WARC is the idea that, you know, we're struggling to convince the CEO that this matters, that it's important. It's a huge blocker to creative brand building for marketers and also for their agency partners. We've just published actually a WARC guide specifically on how to make that case. So even if you're not at Cannes this year, WARC already has a huge number of resources as to how to do this. But Instacart is a really great example. We're looking forward to interviewing Laura Jones on the podcast, running that after the festival. So definitely follow the pod if you're not already, because it's going to be a really good interview coming up in the next few weeks as well.
It's a great point. She's really worth listening to. She's a real sort of up and coming voice in this space.
Totally, and a cool digital brand as well. And we need a lot more examples of how digital brands are really nailing that brand building stuff. So, what else are you looking forward to? I know we've got a few brand CMOs in the Creative Impact lineup, but this year there's going to be the very first CEO forum in Cannes. Tell me a little bit about that.
Yeah, so I guess if we stick on this idea of how do we convince the C-suite, we need to bring them in. Now, the CEO forum is a new thing that's been trialed by Cannes Lions this year. They're bringing CEOs into the festival and creating a space for them to learn, to discuss, to engage. So I think that's a really important step forward. If you think about the development, how Cannes has developed over the years. It started off very much as a space for creatives, and there's still really at the heart of the festival is that sort of love of creativity and that creative audience. But when the clients started coming to Cannes, led by Jim Stengel from Procter and Gamble, we really started to see the festival take off as being the ultimate industry meeting place. It's where all parts of the industry come together. They celebrate creativity, but it's really the sort of the heart of the year for advertising and marketing. And so it's important, we think, to sort of take that a step further and bring not just the creatives and the marketers in, but then extend that to other parts of the C-suite. So, because we know that creativity isn't just a sort of, we talk about it a lot in marketing, but it's not just a marketing thing. We know about like the importance of innovation, the desire for companies in general to be more customer centric. Now, these are all marketing questions, but they're also much bigger than that. So it's really interesting that we're starting this process of inviting CEOs in. So I'd love to see what's going to come out of that. And we also have a CEO on stage this year as well. We had I think last couple of years we've had CFOs on stage. We had the McDonald's CFO Ian Borden last year.
Think we've had MasterCard at some point as well.
We had MasterCard, a couple of years ago. We had the CFO of MasterCard. This year we've got the CEO of Gap on the Creative Impact stage, talking about that process of sort of bringing Gap back to life and make it sort of interesting and relevant again. So it's going to be really interesting as we come out the other side of the week to start to join the dots between these different areas and go, well, actually, okay, what did we learn from that CEO side, and what are we learning from the marketing side, and how do we join those two things together?
So what's the second theme?
I picked out, I think, 6 in my preview.
It was very hard to cut these down for the podcast.
It was. The one I'm going to go for next is what we're calling unshittification. I think a lot of our listeners will have heard the term unshittification, which I think was originally a term created by Cory Doctorow, who was talking about the way internet platforms and services degrade over time as they switch from essentially whatever makes them special in the first place to try and monetize. And this sense of things gradually degrading over time has taken on a much broader meaning in our sort of post-COVID world, where a lot of governments are strapped for cash. It feels like public services are going backwards. It feels like various parts of society and culture are sort of going backwards as well. And now, in our Marketers Toolkit 2025, which we launched back at the end of last year, we didn't, actually, I don't think we used the word unshittification at the time, but we used the term experience gap. And we saw this as an emerging challenge for marketers, which is that there is a growing gap between the sort of vision a brand has of itself, the way it talks about itself in through its communications, through its advertising, for example, and then the actual quality of the product and service that underlies it. We've seen this in, I'm not going to name any names, but
Go on.
things like travel, where let's like airline brands, for example. There are a number of airline brands that still talk a very premium talk, but actually you look at their sort of customer service scores and it's all going off a cliff, because they're just gradually cutting back on all the extras in order to try and maintain competitiveness, keep costs down as fuel costs have gone up. So all these sorts of tensions at the heart of the business between the sort of cost structures and the service that a company is able to deliver, and then the sort of vision, as I say, the vision it puts out in the world. Now, that's a really hard thing. It's a really difficult thing to resolve. And so we are going to be looking at this in a number of different ways. I mentioned the Gap example, for example, but part of what Gap did was really try and go back into its in-store experience and look at that. And then we've got a session by RGA, a lady called Yael Sazakis, and Brent Mitchell from Sephora, who are going to be looking at this with regards to this customer experience and how you start to their phrase is unshittify customer experience. So I love this idea of marketers seizing the opportunity to unshittify their brand. I'm not sure many of them will be able to use that internally, but I think as a sort of way of thinking about reversing this trend, unshittification is quite an interesting theme.
Yeah, consumers are definitely motivated by customer experience, and obviously they will switch brands if their experience is bad. So brands need to take control over that part of their experience as well. And I think Sephora is going to be a really fantastic example. Obviously, a big bricks and mortar retailer as well as online, and the home of dozens, hundreds of beauty brands that are expecting their retail environments to deliver for those suppliers. So I think it's going to be a really interesting case study from Sephora, one of my favorite retail outlets for sure. So let's get into the creator economy. The creator economy is taking over not just the festival, but also the industry. But is it really effective? I think that's going to be one of the really big narratives at Cannes this year is, there's a lot of money in creators, but is it an effective marketing channel?
Yeah, I mean, look, when people aren't talking about AI and future industry business models, the third topic of conversation is going to be creators. Now, this idea, the creator economy, it's nothing new, but at the festival itself, it's becoming more and more apparent the importance of creators to the modern media mix, the modern marketing mix. There's a Lions Creators Program, which is in its second year. That's super successful and is a really interesting addition to the festival. And if you look at what's been going on in the broader business environment, we can start to see why this would be. So we've just seen huge sort of influencer-centric brands enjoy enormous valuations. Poppy is the soft drink is an example, and actually one of the backers of Poppy, an influencer called Alex Earl, is going to be on the Creative Impact stream talking with John Evans from the Uncensored CMO podcast. In fact, Alex Earl has this thing called the Alex Earl effect, where whatever she recommends tends to sell out. So there's some really interesting stuff going on in this space. We've also seen Unilever, the new Unilever CEO, sort of publicly commit to spending more on influencers and creators. But I think there's a sort of big question here, which is that, beyond these sort of headlines, how effective is working with creators or influencers versus more classic sort of paid for media? How do you measure them? Can you compare them? And if you as a marketer have to spend your budget somewhere, where are you going to spend it? Where does it make most sense to spend it?
I think it's a really interesting point as well. And Unilever, of course, is planning to increase its creator investment 20-fold and move 50% of its media spend to social, which is, as new CEO said recently, which is an incredible evolution, really. But also when you look at some of these influencer brands that are kind of the face of the brand, they're working more toward a sale of the brand itself to a larger company as opposed to, pure play sales, marketing effectiveness in the way that we think about it. So if you think about Rode, which is Hailey Bieber's beauty brand, recently got sold to Elf Beauty for more than $1 billion. And Skims, which is led by Kim Kardashian, has a $4 billion valuation. Is the success of the creator economy what the company eventually ends up getting sold for, or is it marketing effectiveness in the way that we think about it?
Yeah, it's fascinating, isn't it? And a lot of the creators at the top end are really savvy entrepreneurs, and yes, they can add reach and maybe a bit of cachet to a product, but actually the biggest payoff may come from, as you say, collaborations or products that bear their name. So it's a really sort of interesting dynamic. And you mentioned Unilever. We are actually going to hear from Unilever's Afka van der Klashorst, who is going to be on stage in our Creative Impact stream with Creative X's Anastasia Leng. And they're actually going to be trying to answer the question, are creators really effective? So we're going to hear a little bit about this, and it's going to be a theme that runs through the festival in different ways, and will definitely be something we're reporting from when we come back from Cannes and try and work out all the things we've learned.
So we're definitely expecting more conversations about proving the effectiveness of these creator economy strategies. That's something we're going to be looking hard at. What are your highlights going to be, aside from Unilever and Creative X, on that specific narrative?
Well, there's one other session I really want to highlight. It's one I'm personally looking forward to a lot. So we have Rob Campbell of Colenso down in New Zealand, and Paula Bloodworth, who works with Idris Elba, his company. But prior to that was a agency side strategist. And they're going to be talking about strategy lessons from artists who only live creatively. And for those of you who don't know, Rob has worked with a number of bands, specifically Metallica is one he's mentioned a lot in passing. His big thing is that the ad industry, which is about culture and creativity, in his words, is so often outmaneuvered by artists or people who work in the creative space who know very little about marketing theory. I mean, be very surprised if Metallica have ever read How Brands Grow, but seem nonetheless to instinctively know how to make ideas work, how to make ideas fly, how to be creatively ambitious. And so Rob and Paula are going to be sort of summarizing everything they've learned from working with this sort of different style of creative or creator. And I'm going to boil it down into some lessons for strategists. It's going to be fantastic. And I say that because Rob and Paula, along with Martin Weigel, a few years ago presented Strategy is Constipated, which remains one of my all-time favorite Cannes sessions, not just because of the title, which required quite a lot of explanation to the Cannes Lions content team at the time, but the sheer sort of power and rhetoric within that particular session was really worthwhile. So I know that's going to be a fantastic session.
Yeah, looking forward to that one. And who said marketing effectiveness can't be cool? Idris Elba, Metallica, Dolly Parton, they're bringing all sorts of different case studies that they've worked with to that session. So we're really looking forward to that one. Anything else that you're particularly looking forward to or expecting to come up in your conversations across the festival?
there's so much more. It's going to be a real who's who of marketing effectiveness. We've got so many of the sort of leading thinkers on stage talking about a lot of the things we've just mentioned. So we're going to have Les Binet and Sarah Carter alongside Andrew Tyndall of System One. They're going to be talking about this idea of compound creativity and how the power of basically compounding ideas and consistency over time. Adam Morgan is continuing his sort of crusade against dull. People may know the cost of dull research that he's really pioneered and led over the last couple of years with the likes of Peter Field and John Evans. This year, he's bringing Karen Nelson Field into the fold, and they're going to be talking about the cost of dull media. So that one's going to be really, really interesting. And then we've got Mark Ritson back for his second year.
The naysayer returns.
Yeah, he does indeed. So having for many years insisted that Cannes was a complete waste of time, he actually came for the first year last year, and I think must have quietly changed his mind because he's back for a second year, and he's actually doing something really interesting. He's teamed up with Effie and System One to come up with this sort of new study into the power of creativity, but he's presenting what's called a creativity stack. So five big effects that creativity can have. So I think we're really looking forward to that one. And one more I'll just mention quickly is Tom Roach and Grace Kite. So many people who follow Grace on social media will be aware of this idea she put forward of lots of little. How do we build brands in an extremely fragmented marketplace?
One of the most listened to podcasts we've run on the WARC Podcast this year.
Well, there you go. Yes, exactly. We had them on earlier talking about it, didn't we? So they are bringing that to Cannes. They're moving the discussion forward a bit, and they're joined by JJ Heelan from McDonald's to talk it through. So and again, there is so much more. If you go on the Cannes Lions schedule, search for WARC, you'll get all of this great stuff. Apologies to anybody I've missed out, but there's a huge amount going on through the week.
And the good news is, even if you're not at the festival yourself, we will be interviewing a lot of people on the WARC Podcast next week, including almost all of the amazing speakers that you've talked about. So if you haven't yet followed the WARC Podcast, now is the time to do that, because we will have daily podcasts interviewing a whole bunch of these different people from all across the festival about their presentations.
Absolutely, and I think it's really worth just highlighting to people the many ways you can follow along with all of this, because yes, it's amazing if you're in Cannes, but if you're not in Cannes, then there's as you say, there's the podcast every day, there's our email newsletters every day. There's also, if you really want to see the sessions, there's the Cannes Lions Digital Pass, which you can sign up for, and that will give you catch-up access to all the content we've just talked about. And then after the festival, all the sessions will ultimately appear on the WARC and WARC platforms. So lots of ways to keep in touch with all of this and get involved.
Thanks, David.
Thank you, Anna.
Thanks, David, for joining us on the WARC Podcast. That's all we have time for today as we ramp up to bring you the very latest from Cannes. Be sure to follow the WARC Podcast to hear our festival coverage every day during the festival. See you then.